time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Which phase of Georgia's offense provides the greater concern, the pass or the run?
The run. What's the circumstance? They can't pass.
I literally had forgotten about it. And Cass called me in the car, and she was like, "I know you don't care, but I'm so happy we're number 4." And so I was a good husband for 10 seconds.
Chris Lamons, followed by Dabo Sweeney, as we get you ready on a Thursday evening edition of Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblut, Professor Tom Hayes, and producer Brian Leonard here in our Columbia studios, back home after a very nice trip to Aiken. And we thank the folks of WKSX, our great affiliate in the border city of Aiken, South Carolina, getting us not only fed well at the wing place, but also a fantastic crowd. And we thank them for not only the all-day and week-long promotion, but also for just completely amazing hospitality throughout yesterday and the evening as well. But the big news of the day involves a former Clemson Tiger pro, and not good news involving the city of Houston after a night that comes with big elation for a world championship for them. They have heartbreak as starting quarterback Deshaun Watson is out for the season after tearing his ACL in a non-contact injury in practice. We're not sure whether it's the same ACL he tore whilst he was at Clemson, but I tell you what, just a tough break for a guy who looked like he was ticketed for the Rookie of the Year award.
And, of course, he just won Offensive Player of the Month, I think, in the NFL. So, yeah, it's difficult. And isn't it always the non-contact injury to the knee? You could just have to count all your fingers and toes to count how many guys get injured, non-contact drills, juking on the field just in practice. But the guy has a tremendous future. So this is a painful, in my opinion, minor setback. But he's, as you say, 6 to 9 months to get back to where he was. This will be interesting because part of his game still is the judicious use of the legs to scramble out of the pocket when need be.
I hate to put a comparison with Deshaun Watson to another player who has had injury concerns and is of the same style, but you think about Robert Griffin III and the great rookie season he had when he was at Washington, and the seasons that he had while he was at Baylor, not only running but throwing the football. And you think about what Deshaun Watson did in his final year at Clemson, and he had more touchdown passes through his first 7 games than anybody in the history of the National Football League. But this is the kind of injury that will give you at least some trepidation going forward, especially in your career. And you mentioned the weapon that are his feet, basically. And when you are at least somebody who was in the NFL and who is dependent on mobility, and we're not even saying that he's like Cam Newton. I mean, his passing efficiency far exceeds that of what Griffin did as a rookie, what Cam Newton is doing now. So no, in no way is he a dual threat quarterback in that regard. But it almost goes back to like what we were talking about with Kelly Bryant. If you take the dimension of his legs out of the equation, it limits him. And part of what makes him special is his ability to move.
Yeah, the escapability. But the key point is he does put a lot of stress on those knees because he has the ability to stop on a dime and still get into proper mechanics. And that takes a lot on your joints. And he's like an angular guy anyway. You know, the type that grows fast and they stretch those ligaments out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a second bout with a torn ACL for him, and you just hope it's not a chronic injury and something he can protect himself from doing in the future.
Yeah, the Texans are being very tight-lipped about this situation. They're not necessarily disclosing which knee was hurt. And again, we will get more information, I'm sure, as the the night goes on. But they will start Tom Savage, Will Houston. Looks like they're probably going to sign Matt McGloin, according to Adam Schefter, and it was first reported by the Houston Chronicle's John McClain. But Phil Kornbluth joins us now, and interestingly enough, as we sit here and opine about Deshaun Watson's injury, just a terrible break from Houston's perspective. But not only that, a terrible break for a guy who, but for all intents and purposes, looked like not only he was going to make the Rookie of the Year list, but could have possibly led the Texans to a playoff berth as he looked to try and capitalize his first NFL season.
Yeah, it's terrible news. It's heartbreaking news, come to think of it. And it happened in a practice, not in a game, and
no contact either.
Yeah, it's just football. I mean, you never know when it's going to happen. It's most unfortunate. I mean, this is a guy that Clemson a couple of years ago, he had the torn ACL. They wrapped it up, put a big old brace on it, and he played a game with it, and of course did pretty well in beating South Carolina that day. So, it's really not only is it bad for him individually and for the Texans, it's bad for the league.
Exactly.
He was one of the bright young stars this year, and he'll be back. Yeah. And he'll come back and have a great career moving forward, because I think he's proven to everybody who doubted his abilities, his passing abilities and everything else, that he can be a big-time performer in the NFL. So that's most unfortunate.
And not only that, but, we had talked about it going into the year, and it was always my intention and my thought that he should have been not only the starter going into camp, but the starter coming out of camp. And despite the fact that you had Tom Savage start the year, it didn't take them long to recognize what he could do after pulling him in after that first half against Jacksonville. I mean, it was clearly evident that he was the best quarterback on that roster. And again, a shepherd for a quarterback class that, to be brutally honest, not many people had very highly ranked, but you saw the results of what happened not only from his perspective. Other teams were going to guys in that class. You saw the Bears do it with Trubisky. I'm sure the Chiefs still want to know what Pat Mahomes has to do, but we're seeing the next generation NFL quarterback, and he was at the forefront of that pro.
Well, when John Robinson took over at Tampa Bay, they said, well, why did you put Doug Williams right in the lineup? He said, because you don't learn anything holding a clipboard and drinking water on the sideline. You got to learn in the baptismal under fire, and he was ready for it. There was no doubt about it, because he's one of those quarterback savants. He sees things, and I'm like Corn, just like at Clemson when he had to step aside for a while with that torn ACL at Clemson. There's going to be some learning done on that sideline, and he's going to soak it all in and be a tremendous quarterback when he returns in the 9 months.
And it's far from the only injury that team has suffered too. You lost Whitney Merciless, your favorite player, by the way, because you love that name, and J.J. Watt already for season-ending injuries. And this one, just another tough blow for a city that was elated last night. They don't even get 24 hours to enjoy a world championship, and have to deal with losing their starting quarterback.
Would you trade an ACL for a World Series title?
I don't know.
Probably, yeah. When you talk about 50-plus years of not winning a World Series, what about the emotional roller coaster for the people of Houston when you go back to the devastation of the storms and then the run of the Astros and up and down with the baseball season and winning the World Championship, and then you get this news today that your prize quarterback gets hurt in practice, and that's probably a death blow to the football season for the Texans.
Surely is. Tom Savage is not the same quarterback that Deshaun Watson is. I think anybody who at least knows that city, and I had a little connection to that city having lived there, the devastation there certainly outranks anything that could happen in the sports world. And what the Astros did for that city was probably at least singularly important in raising the spirits of folks in that city. But certainly this changes things from their perspective. But we've got a lot today. Got a lot today involving South Carolina and Clemson. A.J. Turner, T.J. Brunson, Brent Venables, Christian Wilkins, all scheduled.
The Watson news, though, really it's a downer. It's a downer for everybody in South Carolina. Nobody, and I know the rivalry runs deep, nobody wants to see a player,
of course not,
on either side get hurt at any level, whether it's with their college team or in the NFL. And Deshaun Watson, just a great representative, not only of Clemson, but of the Palmetto State. So you hate to see him go down like that. Yeah, you mentioned we got a great show coming up and we'll be right back.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Song, man. BL loves this song. Producer Brian Leonard loves this song.
Does he really?
He loves this song.
He picks out some good music for us.
He will bump this song while we're here in the studio just chilling.
Well, he's a cool guy with cool tastes. All right, we're back with you.
He didn't know the words, though.
It is Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We are coming to you from downtown Columbia, main streets, where it's very, very busy out there tonight. Got a great show for you. We'll hear from some Gamecocks and Tigers. The coach and the quarterback will be here. Steve Tannehill Chuck Reedy, Mike Morgan on the move a little bit after 7. He's got Arkansas and Coastal Carolina this weekend. Tony Haynes, sideline voice of North Carolina State. We'll hear from him as well later tonight, find out more about the Wolfpack. Watching their game with Notre Dame this afternoon, just refreshing myself on NC State. That was a really close ball game. It was only 21-14, and NC State gave up 7 of those pick 6, first interception thrown by Finley this year. Now, they did give up, NC State did, a ton of rushing yardage. Notre Dame hit them right in the middle of their defensive line early. Adams, who's from North Carolina, you might remember him from recruiting days, very good running back out of the state of North Carolina, had a big day running the ball right up the middle against NC State's defense. Guys, you wonder if Clemson will go that route on Saturday. They're going to take their fair number of shots, but do they go heavy with running the football with either it could be any of their guys? I would like to see at this stage of the season. I thought maybe Feaster would have emerged to be the guy, but maybe it's going to be Etienne's time.
The thing that scares me about NC State is that this is probably one of the most experienced quarterbacks that they will face this season. I mean, they did face Jarrett Stidham, who came over and was the transfer from Baylor going into Auburn, but he had very limited experience in Auburn's offense. And you had Lamar Jackson for Louisville, but at the same time, you have Finley, who is a 4-year player. He is a very, very efficient passer. You have Jalen Samuels, who's an all-everything for them as well. He did not necessarily affect the game as much against Notre Dame because Notre Dame was able to shut him down, and you think that Clemson will be able to do that. But there are a lot of playmakers on that field for NC State and a very good offensive line who Brent Venables, who we'll talk to later, knows that basically owned the day against Clemson last year in Death Valley. So that's where my concern is too. And the other part of this too, much like the Syracuse game, you have to be able to be multidimensional if you're this Clemson offense.
Finley is a rhythm quarterback. If you let him get his snaps, gets into a rhythm, then you're going to have problems all day. I would figure that Clemson is a team that likes to work the corners, makes your defense shift left to right, bam, and then hit you up the middle. Then when you think you have the middle closed, then they'll float that fade pass over you or find the tight end in the seam down the middle. So I think they're going to do that. They're going to play combination big play and ball control to keep Finley off the field.
Well, that's where when you think about Clemson's offense, that's where like Mylan Richard comes in and Deion Kane with the fade route that you mentioned. But as you mentioned, Corn, Notre Dame rushed for 318 yards against NC State. That should be chop-licking stuff if we're looking at Clemson's rushing offense right now.
Yeah, as I look at this game, and let's talk about some of the games this week, and we can talk about some of the things that we think are going to happen. Clemson's right now favored by 7.5. Now, last year, of course, they played an overtime game. By all rights, NC State should have won that game.
Yes.
A makeable field goal. Credit Dabo Swinney, as you might recall, he kept a timeout in his pocket. And he took that timeout right before the field goal.
Ice him.
And it did, because if I remember correctly, he missed it pretty soundly.
Well, didn't he kick it before the timeout went? A lot of times they'll tell the guy to kick it, and I think he made it, and then after icing him, he missed it. Isn't that? I think I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
That's probably what happened. So NC State probably feels like they owe Clemson one. I like Clemson. They have disappointed me with some of the bigger spreads. This is a smaller spread. I like the Tigers laying the 7.5 here. I think they'll beat State. I think State, this is a huge game for them, of course, and probably emotionally they'll be over the loss to Notre Dame. But Clemson also, having been down this road each of the last 2 years, they know this is business time for them. They know how to handle themselves in games like this on the road. Kelly Bryant is totally healthy. There's no doubting that he can do everything. He's over the injuries, the ankle and the head that he suffered against Syracuse. Everywhere else, they're pretty healthy. I guess Mark Fields has been declared out for the game.
He's been declared out. That's the one thing that would concern me if I'm Clemson, because you need to be able to be sound at the cornerback position. And Dabo Swinney has talked about that being one of the deepest positions that they have. And from NC State's perspective, like you said, they're not prepared for this stage. in my opinion. They didn't win against South Carolina to open the season, which will always be a mark against them, and a big stage against Notre Dame. They came up short, and I don't think they'll necessarily be ready for the stage going up against Clemson, despite the fact that they're at home.
Well, depending on they looked pretty good against the stage. We didn't know how Swiss cheese their defense was that night, but their defense played pretty salty against Louisville the night they played them in Raleigh.
Louisville doesn't look very good now.
Well, yeah, but offensively they shut them down. That was the key to the NC State winning that game. So Lamar Jackson did not have a good football game in Raleigh that night. They were running wild. The thing that concerns me, Corn, is something we really don't think about, because we look at the lines of scrimmage, we look at the athletes that Clemson have. This is the year Clemson comes in with a shaky field goal kicker, and they don't want this game to come down to a field goal in Raleigh.
He said that apparently he's going to reserve 2 seats on the bus for the kicker, says Dabo Swinney, and not just for Spence, but for Drew Costa and one other player who has emerged as a walk-on tryout kicker, if you will.
Well, I don't want to trot a walk-on out there who's never kicked before into a pressure situation in Raleigh to try to win this ball game if I'm Dabo Swinney. I'm not sure that's you do what you do. You don't want to shake the confidence of Alex Spence any more than it's already been shaken. And by bringing on a couple of other kickers, you're saying to him,
we don't trust you.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But maybe they don't trust him, and they feel like they got to have somebody else on standby in case he fails. We shall see if it comes to that situation.
It's a good move. Cover your butt.
All right, 800-956-7266 is our phone number tonight here on Sports Talk. Let's go to Carl in Columbia. The first caller of the night. Hello, Carl. How are you?
Go Tigers, baby. Tigers all day. Phil, you forgot last year, Clemson gave them that game. Deshaun threw a quick
pick six
interception, right? Remember? Anthony was on the 2-yard line to throw an interception.
But you know what? That all counts.
Exactly.
It all counts.
So every thought he's talking about this game's going to be real close. It might be close. You know, they got the senior team. That's what gets me. NC State ain't nothing to play with, man.
Experienced.
The confidence pretty good, but I think the Tigers going to go take care of business. Dabo's back on focus.
Yeah. This will be a disappointing loss for NC State if they don't get this done, because they went into the season with high hopes. They lose to South Carolina to open the season. Then they get going a little bit. They lose to Notre Dame up there. But they're still unbeaten in ACC play. If they can beat Clemson, that sort of
that'll wrap it up.
Yeah, pretty much so. That'll pretty much wrap it up for them.
As long as they take care of business against Florida State.
I'd like to say this before I go, Phil. Why should they sign a coach a new contract? This guy has won 13 out of 31 games in the ACC. He's had a senior ladies team this year. He's going to fall back next year. Look at his roster. I think he has 17 or 18 players seniors.
Right. It's an older team. It's definitely a junior, senior, graduate student team. It is an older group. Yeah, this has got to be their year. This has got to be NC State's year before they probably go through. That's a good point, Carl. Before they go through a rebuilding process starting next year.
Similarly to what NC State has at the table, that's a lot of what Georgia's roster looks like too. This is Georgia's chance. Conversely, if you look at the other game, there are a lot of seniors at skill positions, especially the 2 running backs. 3 of them actually are all seniors. So this is very much a one-and-done scenario for both NC State and Georgia.
Finley is a guy that does not throw picks. He had his first one of the season against Notre Dame. He's thrown 12 touchdown passes. And State's only given up 9 sacks while sacking the opponent 20 times. So we'll see if Clemson's defense can muster some pressure. Back after this. You weren't kidding about Brian loving this bumper here.
What'd I say?
Probably when he goes to bed at night, he plays it over and over again. It is time for the coach and the quarterback here on Sports Talk on this Thursday night. So far, we have rounded up the coach. We're looking for the quarterback. It's the other way around.
No, we have the coach. We
That's
do not.
what I thought.
We do not have.
We've rounded up the coach, and we're looking for the quarterback. Yeah. So, Steve Tannehill, where are you? Well, we welcome in Coach Chuck Reedy to a Sports Talk. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Phil. I'm worried about Tannehill.
I know. When he doesn't answer the phone, I get concerned about him.
He's warming up for the Texans.
I might have gotten a call from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think about that, Chuck? I know it breaks your heart to hear the news about Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it does. You know, and I tell you, those ACLs, you know, my last year at Goose Creek, you know, we had a quarterback that had transferred in, a kid named Pedro Manigault, who's very, very talented. Same thing. I mean, non-contact, just stepped the wrong way for his ACL. This was in preseason, lost him for the year. Yeah, it's just sad. I mean, you know, you expect injuries, but you don't expect them, you know, in a non-contact situation.
And I say, you're not a doctor in any way, Chuck, but it just seems like anytime we see these torn ACLs, it's not because these guys are getting hit directly there from a helmet to knee situation. More often than not, it is those non-contact injuries. Why is that?
Well, like you said, my wife's a doctor. She could probably explain it to you, but no, I don't know. I mean, it's you know, I think that, of course, the ACL is, you know, is inside, you know, the knee cavity, and you know, I think it's just a matter of, you know, you step the wrong way. I mean, and that's what it is. I mean, you just, the way you step and your foot, you know, locks and the knee goes and it you know, and it tears it. And like you said, it's normally not a contact injury. Normally it is a non-contact. But anyway, very, very sad. I mean, you know, he's, you know, having maybe one of the best rookie seasons ever by a quarterback. And, you know, very disappointing, but I'm sure he'll come back.
Yeah, of course, he's come back from it before. I mean, I don't know if the NFL reporters and all are aware that he's had an ACL injury before. It had it, I guess, in his junior year? Yeah,
no, his freshman year.
His freshman year. Okay, yeah, my years are running together.
I mean, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a full ACL tear.
Yeah.
You know, because he actually played with it, you know, in South Carolina his freshman year, if you remember. And but anyway, you know, yeah, very sad. But, you know, like I said, he's a great kid, and I'm sure he'll overcome it.
All right, Chuck Reedy is with us. Still no luck with Steve Tannehill, so we will roll with the coach here. Up at Clemson Saturday night, and first of all, let you know, as you well know, they honored Danny Ford. And while they were cheering him on, I yelled from the press box that I said, "You wouldn't be there without Chuck Reedy." Not sure anybody appreciated my comments there, but anyway, he knows that. He knows he wouldn't be where he is today without Chuck Reedy.
Well, without the coaches that he had, and he's always been the first to recognize that. But certainly an honor, you know, well deserved. You know, I'll vent a little bit of frustration here. You know, I wasn't able to go because, you know, I had prior engagements because they didn't announce it until about 10 days before the game that they were going to do it. And, you know, that should have been done in the summer.
Yeah.
And it should have been a big deal. And there should have been a lot more made of it than what was.
He was checking on his. You were checking on one of your island properties, I'm sure, Chuck. Right?
Well, no, but I had, you know, I mean, matter of fact, I never was even contacted by anybody from Clemson.
Oh.
So, you know, I mean, and Danny told me they were going to do it, but I, you know, and it didn't matter. It was about him, wasn't about me. That's irrelevant. But, you know, I just, You know,
you wanted to be there.
Cool.
You wanted to be
there.
I'd
have liked to have been there if it had been done the right way. But you know, just to 10 days ahead of time say, oh, we're going to recognize him before the Georgia State game. He didn't know it until 10 days before.
Yeah, you know, it seemed like kind of a throwaway thing. Did it not to you? I mean, it was like you said, last minute.
Thrown together.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly what it was. He was put in the Hall of Fame in January. You mean to tell me this summer they couldn't have made plans to honor him at a certain game and have all of his former coaches and even if that be the case, players, you know, back for the occasion. And, you know, and this is me venting, not him. I mean, you know, but, you know, I thought it was very, very poorly handled, you know, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm get off my soapbox.
All right, very good. Don't slip off that soapbox. You hurt yourself, you know, at your age.
You're right.
Kelly Bryant, boy, he looked good running around out there in the rain and the wind and everything else and threw the ball pretty well. I mean, it does appear as if he's completely over any injuries he suffered in the Syracuse game.
Yeah, no doubt. And you see how valuable he is to that football team. You know, I mean, I don't think anybody before the season had any idea that he was going to be the kind of player that he has become. I mean, there were a lot of, regardless of what you might read in the paper, there were a lot of concerns about the quarterback position going into the season. And I mean, this guy has, you know, he may be as valuable as any player in the country to his football team, because I think without him, you know, they're not a real good offensive football team. But, you know, he's played, you know, way beyond any expectations I think that people may have had.
How do you feel about this NC State football team, Chuck? It was an offensive line that Brent Venables said kind of had their way with the Tigers last year in a game that, for all intents and purposes, Clemson gave away and NC State gave right back. This group's another year older. How do you feel the Wolfpack matchup with Clemson?
Well, they caught Clemson last year, you know, kind of like Syracuse did and kind of like, you know, Pittsburgh did ago. I mean, Clemson wasn't playing at their best. But what they do a great job of when there's something on the line, you know, they raise their level of play. And, you know, this would be a different Clemson football team this Saturday than it was against NC State a year ago. And, you know, obviously Coach Dorn's done a good job, and they're, you know, a good football team. But, you know, Clemson plays their best, which I would expect they will. You know, they'll beat NC State. I mean, NC State's not good enough talent-wise to be able to beat Clemson.
Now, Chuck, it's interesting when you look at how NC State uses ball control via the pass versus a lot of runs. As you told us last week, you said those big defensive tackles would just push the guards back in the backfield for Georgia Tech. That's exactly what they did. How will Clemson's defense, in your opinion, handle this ball control passing game that NC State employs?
Well, they're going to contain everything, and they're going to make NC State work for everything that they get. And you know, the thing about, I mean, it is very difficult to move the ball, you know, 10, 12 play drives. Very hard. I mean, and so if Clemson just contains them, keeps them in front of them, doesn't give up anything big, you know, NC State will have a hard time sustaining drives and scoring enough points to beat Clemson.
All right, Chuck Reedy is with us, one half of the tandem of the coach and the quarterback. We've given Steve Tannehill the night off, or he's just taking the night off, whatever the case may be. We'll come back with more with Chuck Reedy, talk about South Carolina and Georgia. See what he thinks about the Gamecocks' chances of maybe upsetting the number one team in the country. Does he think they have a chance? We'll find out from him about that. Take his view on Jake Fromm and also Jake Bentley. Had a couple of Jakes going at it in Athens. So we have that coming your way right after the break here on Sports Talk.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Okay, we're back at Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network, back in our studios in downtown Columbia after our visit to Aiken last night and the Wing Place.
Great wings, by the way.
Had a wonderful, wonderful time there. Happy to tell you that we're brought to you by South Carolina Electric Cooperative, your local electric cooperative, sponsor of the annual Touchstone Energy Cooperatives Bowl. Game is coming up December 9th. Make a note about that and buy those tickets. They're cheaper right now than what they will be later on this month. And to find out more about what co-ops are doing across the state, visit ecsc.org. Chuck Reedy, the coach, is with us on this Thursday night. Let's turn the attention to South Carolina and Georgia. Georgia, big 23.5, 24-point favorite, Chuck. I don't know. Except for one game under Will Muschamp, the Gamecocks have been in every game that they've lost. And I don't know. I think that they'll be within that margin. I'm not suspecting they're going to beat Georgia, but I don't think they're going to get blown out like that.
No, I think it'll be a competitive football game. I think Georgia is too talented. In South Carolina, if they continue to do what they've been doing now for most of the season, and certainly the last 3 weeks, and that is not beat themselves, not turn the ball over, not have a lot of silly penalties, they'll be in the ball game, and it'll be a competitive game, I think. Normally games get out of hand when the team turns the ball over, makes silly mistakes in the kicking game or whatever. And South Carolina hasn't done that. South Carolina, in my opinion, is a very well-coached football team. They don't make silly mistakes. And so, it'll be competitive, but, in Athens, and as talented as Georgia is, I think it would take a miracle to win the football game.
Mm-hmm.
This might be hard to answer, Chuck, but is there a phase, either offensively or defensively, of the game that South Carolina can gain an edge on against Georgia?
Well, I don't know that they can gain an edge. The one thing they could do, if they could somehow stop Georgia from running the football so effectively, they could certainly neutralize Georgia's effectiveness and make it a much closer ball game and give them a chance to win. I think that's really the only way that they could make it a game they could win. Because if Georgia comes in here or in Athens and runs for 300 yards, like they've been doing, then it's going to be it's not going to be a real close ball game. But if somehow, and South Carolina has done a much better job this year stopping the run, but they haven't played anybody that can run the ball like Georgia.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, when you were at Clemson, there was a time there when you guys had 5 tailbacks who could have started practically anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. It was an embarrassment of riches there. This mm-hmm. group of running backs, i.e. tailbacks, that Georgia has, what do you think of that collection as a group?
Well, there's nobody in the country that has a group like they have. And what's amazing, and how they do this, and Alabama does it as well, is they got both those guys, Chubb and Michelle, to come back for their senior year. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't happen very often nowadays.
Yeah, how did they do that?
Guys, well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. But, Alabama does it real well, too. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously, Kirby, he learned something from Saban because, to get those guys to come back for their senior year. And then you've got the freshmen, and then you've got Holyfield. And of course, they got the number 1 running back in the nation committed for next year. So, but they run the football, and so when you run the football, you're going to attract, great running backs.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like Nick Saban, of course, Kirby Smart working under him as defensive coordinator, they seem to both like to seduce teams, especially early, Chuck, into throwing them deep against them, almost to the point where say, yeah, take the low percentage pass, and then we'll get you second, third, and long, and then we got you where you want to. But when you looked at Missouri hit those big bombs early against Georgia secondary, how many shots do you think South Carolina will decide, or maybe it's prudent to take in this ball game to see if they can't get behind Georgia secondary?
Well, I think they certainly need to take their shots. And Edwards has proven himself to be a guy that can go up and win the 50-50, battles. And so, they need to take some of those because they're going to need some big plays. I think South Carolina will have a hard time sustaining, long drives, against Georgia. So they're going to have to take the shots. But you don't want to get yourself in a bunch of third and longs against them. That's for sure. But you got South Carolina's just got to go out and play their game, and and just play as hard as they can, and not make mistakes, not turn it over, and hope that Georgia turns it over, and and see where it all ends up.
We thank you for doing a double duty tonight. You can rest up a little bit. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah, well, I hope you're going to dock Tannehill,
Yeah.
Dock his salary.
I don't know what we're going to do. I have to figure something. I'm going to make him do some push-ups or something.
Up, downs.
Yeah. Coach, thank you as always. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Chuck Reedy, the coach, part of the coach and the quarterback.
I'd go over to group therapy and call him out, but he wouldn't recognize me.
Probably not.
He'll recognize you.
He might be hunting somewhere. Maybe he went on a hunting trip to Canada or something. Let me give you the recruiting notes for tonight. We begin with defensive end Kingsley Inagbare, Hapeville, Georgia, one of the most highly talented of USC's recruiting class, committed back in July. Things have been pretty quiet until he got an offer from Notre Dame. Now he has scheduled an official visit to Notre Dame, but his coach, Winston Gordon, said he does not believe Notre Dame can pull him away from South Carolina. He said he's just like any kid who wants to take some official visits. And the coach said that he's committed to South Carolina, and I don't think he's thinking anything. I think he's rock solid to South Carolina, the coach told us. He also said he's a dominant player in any class in Georgia, calls him a Clowney-type defensive end. He is going to visit South Carolina for his official visit the weekend of the Florida game, according to the coach, and then he's also going to take that official visit to Notre Dame. USC offered 2019 running back Eric Gray of Memphis. He also has offers from the likes of Michigan, Stanford, Tennessee, Indiana, Colorado. Last year, he rushed for 2,300 yards, 43 touchdowns. This season, already he's at 2,071 yards and 28 touchdowns. USC offered 2021 running back B.J. Harris of Chattanooga. Clemson offered 2019 defensive end Kevin Harris of Loganville, Georgia. USC also has offered him. USC commitment offensive lineman Wyatt Campbell, Lugoff Elgin, announced last night he will miss the Shrine Bowl. He later told Hale McGranahan of SEC Country he's having surgery to repair torn meniscus in his knee. In basketball, 6'6" Zion Williamson of Spartanburg Day has had in-home visits this week from Clemson, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and North Carolina. According to 24/7 Sports, he has taken officials to each except Clemson, which he's visited unofficially. He's also visited USC unofficially. He's not indicated any plans for this weekend. USC coach Frank Martin, in a tweet to promote Sunday's Hurricane fundraiser against Virginia Tech and Columbia, apparently is expecting someone important to visit. He said in his tweet, quote, "Great game versus great team for a great cause and a big-time visitor," in all caps, in the house. This is as good as mine as to who that might be.
Might not be recruiting related, though.
Might not be, but it might be.
Could be.
Possibly.
Who knows?
Some college.
I don't know if it's done that early, though.
You know, I forgot to do the daggone recruiting report last night.
Way to go.
That's 2 times.
Doc, your page.
Should I wait till the damn marching band is? I mean, is it bleeding through? Can you hear?
Now I can.
All right, here we go. No! It's getting louder. You want to wait?
Yeah, the football doesn't start till 8.
Okay.
With both goalies on.
Woo! Check one. All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. Defensive end Kingsley Inagbari of Hapeville, Georgia, one of the most highly talented of USC's 2018 recruiting class, is going to take an official visit to Notre Dame, but his coach, Winston Gordon, says Gamecocks have nothing to worry about. He does not foresee his young man wavering on his commitment to USC. He'll take his official visit to USC for the Florida weekend. USC offered 2019 running back Eric Gray of Memphis. He also has Michigan, Stanford, Tennessee, Indiana, Colorado offers, and others. USC also offered 2021 running back B.J. Harris of Chattanooga. Clemson offered 2019 defensive end Kevin Harris of Loganville, Georgia. And USC commitment offensive lineman Wyatt Campbell of Lugoff Elgin had to pull out of the Shrine Bowl because he's having knee surgery. Phil Kornblut, South Carolina, Radio Network Sports.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
All right, we're back. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic,
Sir.
Professor Tom Hayes coming to you from downtown Columbia. Sports Talk is your final word in sports every night in South Carolina. Your most informed, your most incredibly persuasive, and when I'm talking, your most handsome word in sports every night.
Hashtag fake news.
Will Muschamp said Corey Helms is fine. Will start at Georgia. Malik Young is questionable. Terry Googer, we've been discussing that.
The wide receiver with 2 G's in his name.
He won't play. We should listen. He's been around forever. We should know the correct way to pronounce it.
Just call him 2G.
I've just heard it too many different ways over the years. I can't settle in on us. Well, let's ask Mike Morgan. Mike Morgan's done Gamecock football before. He's had to look at the pronunciation guide. He's had to ask for clarity on some of these names. As Mike Morgan joins us, Morgan on the move. How do you pronounce it? Terry what?
It's Dondriel Pinkins, not Dondrell.
Okay, and it's Terry what?
Haven't got a clue.
You've never had to say his name?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Mike is brought to us by Founders Federal Credit Union. Earn more this Christmas with select Founders credit cards. Receive double CU rewards points on all retail purchases through the end of the year. For complete promotional details and restrictions, visit foundersfcu.com. Not a Founders member. Visit relaxjoinfounders.com to see if you qualify for membership. And by BP Skinner Clothiers. People nationwide get their custom-made suits and accessories from Brent Skinner. Very best in suits, shirts, pants, shoes, and more. Available to you, located in Columbia. You can visit the great showroom in the Vista. No matter where you are, Brent will come to you. Visit bpskinnerclothiers.com to set up an appointment. All right, Mike is with us, and a lot of stuff happened. Yeah,
not Dacus.
You're correct. Terry Googer or Googer. Come on, you have to have said it one time.
It's Googer.
I have not had a South Carolina game this year, so I've had no reason to say that name.
Interesting.
Well, you got Coastal Carolina this week, so that's close.
Close enough. I'm sure they have plenty of names that are similar and just as perplexing.
Are you prepared for the Coastal Carolina?
Which one?
Abercrombie.
I know. Yeah, Oshamar.
Yeah.
Oshamar Abercrombie, but he's not going to play, so I don't think I'll say his name a whole lot. They're going to go with a couple of freshmen.
But you should mention his name, just the fact that he's not playing.
I'm sure we'll mention it at the top, and I can promise you I'll pronounce it correctly. So you have nothing to worry about there.
We've gone off the rails already.
All right, around the SEC, it's been a pretty humdrum kind of week, huh?
Well, you know, this year, and I am hardly one to predict things, unlike the Sports Illustrated writer that predicted the Astros would win the World Series 3 years before it happened.
I know.
But the one thing that I thought was rather predictable this year is that this would be a season of angst and anxiety and a lot of coaching changes and other situations where fan bases are not happy with the coaches, but maybe the buyout is just too large to make a change. I think we talked about that some last week. You know, the Florida debacle is it's one for the ages. Jim McElwain, for whatever reason, was never a good fit, did not do himself any favors, did not ingratiate himself with any of the administration, any of the fans, anybody at all. And people that I talked to that have been around there for a while and had gotten along with just about every other coach. And they've had a mixture of personalities. I mean, Urban Meyer was not exactly a cup of sunshine, but nobody had more negative vibes coming off them as a head coach in Gainesville over the last 20 years than Jim McElwain. So the fact of the matter is he did absolutely nothing, zero, to improve the offense. You add all that up and an insane remark that has been unsubstantiated about death threats, and you could see where that was going in a hurry. So that was actually one coaching change I did not anticipate at the beginning of the year. All the other ones that have already happened or are in play is pretty much what I thought. And we're heading toward a historic year. I think the record for coaching changes in the SEC was 5 in 1 year, and that was around World War II, a little bit different circumstances. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast. And if you want a job in this league, you're going to make a ton of money, you're going to have a ton of resources, you're also going to have a ton of pressure, and the revolving door of coaches spins faster in this league than it does any other.
Is the pressure, especially in the West, I mean, this doesn't affect Florida, but it obviously affects some programs in the West. Do you think that the pressure to supplant or at least catch up with Alabama is what basically is the leading cause of that angst?
I think in the West it is, but that doesn't give any
Florida
excuse for the coaches that have failed in the East,
right,
whether it's a Butch Jones, whether it's a Jim McElwain. Will Muschamp obviously struggled at Florida in his 4 years, and you could make the case, even though Mark Richt won a lot of games, he didn't win enough. He only made it to one SEC championship game, I believe, in his last 10, 11 years, and didn't win any in his last decade. So when you add all that up, I could see where maybe a Dan Mullen, who's actually a candidate for Florida, maybe he gets a pass for losing 4 or 5 games a year. Maybe an LSU coach gets a little bit of a mitigating factor when they lose to Alabama 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6. But there's no excuses for the coaches in the East. There's no excuses for how the East has fallen so far below the Western Division, which, by the way, is not even the best division in the country this year. I mean, you got to go to the Big Ten to find the best division and really the best conference in college football. The SEC's had a little bit of a down cycle. Last year, I thought it would because of all the quarterback issues. This year, that you don't have that same excuse. There's just some teams and programs that have not been doing what they're supposed to do.
So you're going to be in Arkansas this weekend, Coastal Carolina and Arkansas, and that's another unhappy place right now, despite the come-from-behind win, miracle win by them at Ole Miss last week. I got to believe that Bielema is another one who's looking over his shoulder. What's the vibe you're getting out of Fayetteville at this point about his situation?
The vibe is not – it's not a great one, as you would expect. It's year 5. I think everybody thought they'd be better, including him. I think everybody thought their identity would be, at bare minimum, even if they're losing some games, they would be able to run on people. They're 10th in the league in yards per carry. They're 7th in rushing yards. So basically, they're the bottom half or middle in the 2 categories that you thought Brett Bielema would certainly have a strength at Arkansas, if nothing else. And the defense has been atrocious almost every year he's been there. So when you look at all that, I don't think the expectation level or the pressure cooker is the same at Arkansas as it is LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. But they certainly expect to do better than what they've seen in the last couple of years. So, yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of angst in Fayetteville as well. And when I look at the rest of the schedule, I just don't know if there's enough to change that. Now, well, Jeff Long hired him. It was a splash hire. I was the first one to say I thought it was a great hire. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I was right. Doesn't mean he was right. But he might give him another year. I don't get the sense that he's in nearly as hot a water as some of the other coaches out there. Wouldn't surprise me if they made a change. Wouldn't surprise me if they gave him another year.
All right, got about 45 seconds to answer these 2 questions quickly. South Carolina, okay. Georgia, Gamecocks basically 23.5, 24-point underdog. Can they play Georgia closer than that?
Yes, but I told you Florida had no chance against Georgia last week, and I would tell you that Georgia's not going to lose a game in the Eastern Division this year, and I don't think they're going to lose to Auburn either. I think Georgia's got everything that you want to make it to Atlanta.
And about 20 seconds, you think Clemson has any trouble with NC State?
Oh, I think it could be a very close game. Absolutely. NC State can match up defensively, and they got a quarterback that can make some plays. So I would expect that to be an entertaining game.
Thank you, my friend. Enjoy yourself there in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Will do. Take care, guys.
I imagine they'll have some barbecue for that game, I would think.
They are big on the hog out there.
I think they are.
Although you never trust anything that comes out of the state of Arkansas. Just have to say that.
True that. More on NC State coming up.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
All right, we're back at Sports Talk on a Thursday night from the capital city, the best capital city in the Carolinas. We go to that other capital city in the Carolinas, Raleigh, North Carolina. Be heading up there Saturday to see Clemson and NC State. We welcome in one of the voices of the Wolfpack.
You talk like that, they might meet you at the border.
I'm not scared of anybody from North Carolina. Tony Haynes, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great. You know, best capital city. I mean, it's all. I know you're not. I know you're not in Tallahassee. So.
That's correct. That is correct. Hey, it's good to have you with us. You were with us before South Carolina.
Yes.
Took down the Wolfpack. That was a shock to you, wasn't it?
A shock. I mean, you know, but it kind of it set forth a pattern for NC State that we've seen in NC State's 2 losses. You know, State lost the turnover battle twice this year. Mm-hmm. South Carolina game and the Notre Dame game. The Pack is -2 in those 2 games turnovers. And in both of those games, NC State gave up 2 non-offensive touchdowns. You know, when you're not a dominant team and you give up touchdowns with the opposing team's offense not on the field, there's a good chance you can lose. And I think that was kind of that's a common thread between NC State's 2 losses this year against and they lost the turnover battle. They gave up non-offensive touchdowns in both of those games, and State was unable to run the ball in those 2 games. The Pack, I think, against South Carolina averaged like 2.2 yards per carry, just over 2 yards per carry against Notre Dame. Otherwise, you know, you look at NC State's wins, they're +7 in turnovers, and they've averaged, I think, almost 5 yards per rush in those games. So, you know, now it's different now than the South Carolina game. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't have a sampling there to work with. Now we have a sampling. We kind of know what separates NC State wins and NC State losses.
Yet you're still 4-0 in the league. You're in first place in the division, so thus you control your own destiny. I'm sure that's something that Dave Doran has been selling his team this week. You take care of your business against Clemson, and you move on, and you can still have a phenomenal season.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. If you look at it, how big this guy is, it's a big game for Clemson, obviously, too. And they have a larger stage. They're still thinking about the college playoff, obviously. But, you know, NC State can win this game on Saturday. They've got 3 games after that, and they'd only need to win one of those 3 games to represent the Atlantic Division in the ACC Championship. So, yeah, it comes down to, really for NC State, it comes down to this one game. Same thing for Clemson. So, yeah, it's like I know Coach Swinney said it a couple of days ago, and Dave Doran mentioned it earlier this week. This really is like a playoff game for both of these teams. You know, I know the college playoff starts on January 1st. For Clemson and NC State, this is, for all intents and purposes, like a playoff game if you kind of look at what's on the line and the stakes involved.
Where do you think NC State could possibly have an advantage against Clemson, whether it's, you know, throwing the football against Clemson's secondary that will have players out, or is it something in the run game? Where do you think NC State will have an advantage come Saturday?
Well, I think NC State needs to stop scheduling Clemson. I think that would be a great start.
I don't think the conference office would look kindly on that.
This is the Textile Bowl, man. What are you talking about? It's the Textile Bowl.
Yeah, we have to throw that out. I think they're in the same division, so you're going to play Clemson every year. You know, I still believe that NC State needs to run the ball at least decent to have a chance to win in any game. And I go back to the 2 losses. State has averaged just over 2 yards per carry in the 2 losses. The other games that they won, the 6 games that they won, they averaged almost 5 yards per carry. Ryan Finley's having an excellent year at quarterback for NC State. But he's not one of those quarterbacks, I don't think, where you just say to Ryan Finley, okay, we can't run the ball today. We want to turn the ball. We have to turn it over to you. You have to win the game for us. I think NC State, like Clemson actually, relies on balance on offense. I mean, you look at Clemson's numbers, they throw for about the same amount of yards as they run the ball. And I think NC State's very similar. I think State needs some semblance of a running game in order to generate a passing game where you get into those play action throws, you can throw those
slip screens that they like to utilize and some of the other things that they do in their passing game. So, and then if you can't run the ball against Clemson, they do lead the nation in sacks too. So it makes it a lot more difficult to protect the quarterback. So, you know, I think for me, NC State's still going to have to generate some running game. I'm not talking about 200 yards. I think that State has to run the ball for 140, 150 yards to set up the play action passing for Ryan Finley and for NC State as well, because this is an excellent Clemson defense. I know you talk about the secondary being beat up, but, you know, this is, I think, the best. You guys watch Clemson more than me, but I think it's the best defense Dabo's probably had down there. And for NC State, the other thing, against a defense of that caliber, you know, if you're forced into a steady diet of 80 and 85-yard tries to score, you're not going to score a lot of points. You know, I think NC State's going to have to win that hidden yardage battle and have some short fields with which to work to put points on the board, at least to put enough points on the board to beat Clemson, because Clemson's obviously still got a pretty prolific offense as well.
When you looked at the schedule, you say, look, North Carolina State has a chance to beat Clemson, but how physically can they come out of that Notre Dame game on the road against a physical Notre Dame team? And also you talked about the running game. How much of an importance will the dynamo you have in Nyheim Hines really add to that running game if it is successful?
Well, the thing about Nyheim, he's a home run hitter. You know, he's one of those guys that you can stop him. He might carry the ball 8, 9, 10 straight times, and you stop him for 2 or 3 yards. But if you don't fit a running play the right way on defense, if there's a misfit there, or you make a mistake with your defensive alignment and filling gaps, Nyheim Hines then can take it 70, 80 yards for a touchdown. And he's that home run hitter that they have at tailback that otherwise, when he's not in the game, they don't have anybody else like him. And then you throw in his ability to make big plays in the return game, those kickoff return and punt return. You know, that was a big blow to them last week. They lost him midway through the first quarter. He was not able to come back, and they were kind of missing that big play threat at not only the tailback position, but also as a punt returner and a kick returner. So he gives them a different dimension. He's had a great year. You know, prior to the Notre Dame game, he had 3 straight 100-yard-plus games. Coach Doran said today that, you know, he has practiced the last few days. They believe that he'll have a chance to play. But you got to remember with Nyheim Hines, everything comes down to his speed, his explosiveness. And if he, for whatever reason, because he's got an ankle problem, if he's lost a step, then all of a sudden Nyheim Hines is really not as effective a running back as he might be otherwise. So, you know, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on early in the game on Saturday.
Real quick, Tony Haynes from the NC State Wolfpack Radio Network. The Wolfpack defense uncharacteristically gave up a ton of rushing yards, especially early on, right up the middle. What was the issue? And obviously they've addressed that this week. Are they satisfied that they fixed that problem?
Well, I was shocked, to be honest with you. And, you know, I think first you have to tip your cap to Notre Dame. You know what? Notre Dame has run the football on everybody, maybe except Georgia. They lost that Georgia game week 2, 20-19. But NC State, not only this year, but over the last 2 years, State has not given up anything on the ground. I mean, the Pac has been one of the best teams defensively against the running game. And they've done a great job. I mean, coming into that game against Notre Dame, they'd only yielded 92 yards per game rushing. But I think Notre Dame's running game is the real deal. They have one of the best offensive lines in the country. They have a quarterback who can run the football. He's a threat on the read option. I know Clemson utilizes a lot of those concepts as well. And Notre Dame's unique with their ability to run the ball. They can run at you with power. They can run at you with finesse. Not only do they have a big, strong offensive line, it's a big offensive line that is athletic. Their center pulls, their tackles pull, their guards pull. I was very impressed with them, but I was very surprised because, to be honest with you, in the last 2 years, I've not seen anybody run the football against NC State like that. So, you know, yeah, they have some things to work on this week. But, you know, unlike Notre Dame, I think Clemson throws the ball better. I think Clemson's got better balance than Notre Dame. So,
Tony, I hate to do this. We got to jump in, but we appreciate it very much. We'll see you Saturday. Back in a moment. Okay, we're back. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. In a moment, going to hear from the Gamecocks' A.J. Turner, who, based on the way he performed the other day, should get a lot of work against Georgia. He's got the speed and the elusiveness, perhaps, to get away from some of those Georgia defenders and make some big plays for the Gamecocks on Saturday. That's coming up in just a moment. I want to give you the high school foot. You okay?
Yeah.
You were moaning over there.
No.
You trying to develop a thoughtful statement.
I was trying to develop a thoughtful statement.
Or you think on that thoughtful statement.
Thoughtful comment.
Anyway, our high school report tonight is brought to you by Farm Bureau. With new auto insurance rates from Farm Bureau, you could be saving a whole lot of money. Even if you received a quote before, the rates are now more competitive than ever. So go get a no-obligation quote today at favrates.com. High school players of the week from the High School Sports Report. In 5A, it's Ty Olenchuk of Dutch Fork, who passed for 309 yards and 5 touchdowns. In 4A, it's Peyton Mangrum of Eastside, who caught 14 passes, 273 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Eastside's having a marvelous year at 9-1. 3A Player of the Week, Lawson Cribb of Myrtle Beach, who led the Seahawks to a win over Wilson, passing for 282 yards and 3 touchdowns. AA Player of the Week is Hunter Helms of Gray Collegiate, quarterback, passed for 228 yards and 2 scores. I think I know his dad. His dad is probably Todd Helms. Don't hold me to that, but that's my guess. The guy who founded Gray Collegiate.
Interesting.
And the Class A Player of the Week is Micah Bryant of Hemingway. Had a huge game in the win over Lakeview, had 10 tackles, had an interception for a touchdown, returned a fumble for a touchdown, and had a touchdown rushing as the Hemingway Tigers completed a perfect regular season.
Congratulations to them.
Yes, they're very good in 1A. And got to give you the Skeeza Players of the Week and or the Skeeza Player of the Week for this past week from the High School Sports Report. And that would be Trad Beatty of Ben Lippen, 440 yards for the Temple commits, 4 touchdowns, as Ben Lippen rolled over Cardinal Newman.
Very nice.
There you go. That is the high school report. Now, there are a few high school playoff games tonight. Maybe a few is too strong. I think there's a couple of playoff games tonight.
A selection.
Yes. Very small number.
A limited selection.
So check it out.
And
of course, a big array of high school football playoff games tomorrow night.
Would you say it's a prefix menu maybe of high school football games?
You can say that.
Prefix.
I'll let you say that. You say that.
I will say that.
All right. So anyway, going back to what I was saying about A.J. Turner, I thought he was very impressive the other day against Vanderbilt. That's Vanderbilt. It's not Georgia, but he is the guy of their running backs who does have that breakaway speed and that elusiveness, and they might need that against that Georgia defense.
Well, it's weird. If you would have told me before the Tennessee game who would be the running back to look forward to as the bell cow with Rico Dowdle out, I would have said it would have been Tyson Williams. But instead, A.J. Turner took the bull by the horns. Career-high 121-yard effort against the Commodores. He knows he'll need to bring that effort and more to beat the Georgia Bulldogs on Saturday.
Just started to get a lot more opportunities. Rico's been down, and, what Muschamp's always said is man down, man up. So, just got to step up, and I feel like I've been doing that, and just got to continue to keep doing that and keep executing as offense.
AJ, how much of that was what you guys tried to do every game versus Vandy had a pretty bad run defense, and you were going to keep going at it?
I mean, I think, going to every game, we expect to, run the ball, and we want to run the ball because you have to have a balanced offense. We got to run and make them cover, our receivers and stuff like that. So I feel like in every game, we try to run the ball. It doesn't always work like that. But this week it's going to be really important for us to run the ball so that we can air it out on them because we feel like that we can do that on them. So we just got to, like I said, just execute.
How much does Jake, having a few runs for him out of those RPOs, kind of help the running game as a whole?
I think that's big because, they don't really expect Jake to run the ball. And when he pulls it, I feel like he's going to always get positive yards because it's so unexpected. And nobody really expects Jake to move how he does. He's not, a real fast guy. He's not the fastest guy, but he always gets the job done. He always gets the first down or, like he scored twice on Saturday. So, we're going to need that in the future. So he's got to keep doing that.
What do you think of your offensive balance between pass and run?
I think we have a good balance. I feel like we can really air it out. We have a lot of receivers. We have Brian, Shy, and Ortre, we have a lot of different guys that can make plays, catching the ball. We can run the ball as well. I mean, we've got 3 backs. We have 4, like I said, Rico is down. We got Tyson, Mon, and, even Kinlaw can help us, I feel like. So I feel like we have a really good balance. It's just a matter of us being able to execute the plays that are called.
How tough mentally was it to adjust to life without Deebo Samuel?
To be honest, I mean, kind of like I said earlier, it was a tough loss. We all love Debo. He did a great job for us. He was doing a lot of things, making a lot of plays. But Muschamp, he's a big guy, man down, man up, like I said earlier. So really felt like our team, we took that adversity and we've created it into something positive. So we just got to keep doing that and continue on with that.
How confident are you guys offensively now that the run game is going? This is the most confident you guys have been on offense this year.
I feel like we're confident for multiple different reasons. Being able to air it out and, like I said earlier, have receivers to be able to catch the ball and players to be able to run the ball and create space and just get on the perimeter. I feel like they can't cover everything, so we feel like we've been doing a good job of mixing and matching, creating our own matchups, and executing and winning them. So,
AJ, it's been a while since this program has had a game with these kind of stakes attached to it. Do you feel like you guys are ready for this kind of a challenge?
I feel like we're going to be ready with whatever's in front of us. Like, we practice today, we're going to have to practice hard all week. We know who we're playing against. We know that they're good. They're a solid team. They have great offense, defense, great team speed on special teams and stuff like that. It's just a matter of us willing to go up there to Athens and bring what we got.
All right, A.J. Turner of the Gamecocks, bring what they got. Will that be enough for the Gamecocks? I hate to talk. One thing I hate to do.
Is that the new bring your own guts, by the way?
Well, the one thing I hate to talk about in previewing a game is to talk about a team not having a chance. And I don't want to say that about South Carolina. Here we are talking about, hey, can they keep it within 24? Da-da-da-da.
It's 0-0 when they start.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Chuck was exactly right in talking about it. Cannot have turnovers.
No.
Got to protect the football. Cannot allow the big play by Georgia. They live on the big play, the big long run. Cannot allow that to happen.
No stupid penalties.
No stupid penalties. Like he pointed out, I mean, the Gamecocks have been a very disciplined team to this point all season.
Here's the problem. The wild card is those Georgia kids.
Mm.
And the other Georgia's going to try to get chippy and talk to them, and they have to ignore that crap. They have to ignore it and play a football game, concentrate on a business trip, not an emotional roller coaster.
Crazy stuff happens in games in November, guys. Whether or not it's, guys losing focus, guys getting lulled into sleep, maybe not necessarily taking this assignment as intently as you would, because this is an in-between game for Georgia. I don't want to necessarily say it's a trap game, because I don't think there are any trap games when you're an undefeated team.
Yeah, number one in the country.
But it is the week in between their two biggest rivals, at least in their mind, Florida and Auburn. I know that people on this side of the border look at the rivalry with Georgia a little bit more loftily than, say, the fans do, or at least the Georgia Bulldog players and coaches. But from the standpoint of where you sit, this is the in-between game. So you have to capitalize on whatever emotion you can if you're South Carolina, and maybe get a little thing, maybe there's a new wrinkle in the offense we don't see or we don't expect, something of that nature.
Georgia has more rivals than anybody else in the country. Exactly. I'm talking about true rivals. Exactly. I mean, and South Carolina considers Georgia a rival. You're probably right. Georgia probably doesn't look at South Carolina the same way.
Not too many.
But Auburn is a true rival as well.
Georgia's a South Soldiers
Florida
rival.
is a true rival.
Tennessee.
And then Georgia Tech. I wouldn't say Tennessee, but I'd say Georgia Tech.
When
that's at least. I guess you put Tennessee in the same boat as South Carolina.
Georgia Tech and Georgia are kind of like Kansas and Kansas State. They're basically forced to play each other by proximity, but they really don't care about each other that much.
All right, we'll be right back.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Breaking news out of Washington. The Islanders and the Capitals, after one period, are scoreless.
It's 2-1.
Stop me if you've heard that before in a hockey game.
2-1 Washington, you jerk face.
I can't believe you're sitting here watching hockey.
What's wrong with hockey?
It's not a widely accepted sport.
I never said it needed to be.
I actually enjoyed
it. Is a man's sport.
The one time I've been to a hockey game, I did enjoy it.
It's great live.
An NHL game, I did enjoy it.
It is one of the greatest live sporting spectacles that there is outside of college football.
All right, another high school report for you tonight here on Sports Talk. I want to remind you that our high school football reports throughout the season brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. They have new auto rates for you at Farm Bureau, and you could save a lot of money. Even if you've received a quote before, it's worth the effort to give them a call and check out their rates because they're more competitive than ever, and you can get a no-obligation quote today at favrates.com. And the playoffs are underway officially.
Playoffs?
Northwestern and Lawrence are playing tonight, and Northwestern is up 10-9 on Lawrence in the first quarter.
That's the same Northwestern that fired their head coach earlier this year?
Yes. It
Just
is
checking,
indeed.
just
Yeah,
checking.
they
Still-
went through some
Still ridiculous.
tumult up there in Rock Hill.
Still ridiculous.
And, of course, got a bunch of playoff games tomorrow night all across the state. We will have scores for you right here, 10, 10:30, and 11 o'clock. More scores in 5 minutes than you can get anywhere else in an hour on South Carolina Radio Network. So make sure you tune in tomorrow night. Now, Clemson. Tiger's going to be heading over to Raleigh to take on NC State. You heard from Tony Haynes. Clemson coming off a very good defensive performance against Georgia Tech. Numbers got a little skewed late in the game because Tech, primarily against Clemson backups, went down the field, knocked in a touchdown. Otherwise, Clemson held them in check all night. Now they have to go back to old-fashioned football, not the triple option, but a football of formations and movement and a passing game along with the running game. So Brent Venables, the Clemson defensive coordinator, has had to deal with that transition in getting his game plan ready for NC State, and he respects that Wolfpack offense.
They're a good team. You know, I think they played well on offense. I think they played, good up front and, made competitive plays. Nothing magical. They were well prepared and NC State missed some opportunities. They moved the ball, but Notre Dame did a good job, caused the turnovers, a tight game. It was back and forth. It was anybody's game, and then it opened up there in the third quarter with like a lot of games when you got two very comparative teams playing and somebody turns the ball over, and we're playing at home, helped them as well. But really, as much as anything, we're opportunistic and we're sound in what they did and then out executed in a few critical situations, and we're able to possess the ball and control the line of scrimmage and run it, and made some explosive plays.
You're waiting on Ryan Finley to make a mistake in a little while. Is that
kind
of what sets him apart from other quarterbacks?
Well, I mean, I think his track record speaks for itself. A year ago, I think coming into our game, he had not thrown a pick, and then whatever the streak was, pretty incredible on this day and age. It's not like they're running the triple option. He's a very smart, very accurate, great poise, very patient, and talented. And with a very talented, easily their best group of skill that they've had, and the best group of skill that we've seen this year.
How does Nyheim Hines stress the defense?
He's just very fast and explosive and runs with great power, and gets to 100 mile an hour in just a few seconds, can fly. And so changed the game a couple of times. We played up there last time, took one to the house and changed the field, took it back to the 25 or so another time, and past the 50 another time. That's how you give up a lot of points too. You give up a few explosive plays, and next thing you know, they got 40 on the board. But he's a game changer.
How much do you think that factored into their
struggles in Notre Dame?
Oh yeah, that's a just take any one, our first or second best player on our team on either side of the ball off the field, and see how that affects us. We lost Kelly. That was a big loss, and so that's a great player to lose, and in two different phases of the game. So I'm sure it affected him.
Coach, all the different shifts and personnel groupings and moving Jalen Samuels around, is it harder than normal to get a beat on what they do?
Yeah, I do. And doing different things, and then you would think that he's the dude, and he is. Trust me. But he's got 11 and 12 and 3, as well as 7 and 25. Runs with power. Gillespie runs with great power too, and a very good offensive line.
All right, there you go, Brent Venables. He's the dude.
I'm the dude, man, so that's what you call me, or his dude, or his dudeness, or Duderino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
I think, again, NC State's their defense is very, very good. Their defensive ends are very, very good. So we look at their defense against Clemson's offense. It'll be a challenge for Clemson's offensive tackles to hold up and keep pressure off of Kelly Bryant. But, again, the advantage Clemson has there, it's hard to know where Kelly Bryant's going to be at any given time. And so Clemson hasn't given up a bunch of sacks because he can run away from them. Conversely, Ryan Finley is not as agile, and he's more an in-the-pocket presence. Clemson's pass rush, which has been outstanding, as Tony Haynes pointed out, might have some success if they can crash in on those tackles for NC State. They might have some success getting to Finley, who's only thrown the one pick this year. But if you get in his grill, make him uncomfortable, he might force some things and make a mistake or two, and that's a big turnover for Clemson.
So that's the problem. NC State is not a team that necessarily beats themselves. And I know that
to this point.
And I think, too, you have to look at the Notre Dame game and say that they were able to take advantage of some weaknesses with NC State, namely the rushing ability. We've seen them struggle on special teams, especially when you think about what Deebo Samuel did. And special teams could be something where if you get Ray McLeod loose on an edge, it could be something that can be an advantage. Travis Etienne is taking back kickoffs as well now for them, for Clemson. So in that regard, it could be another situation where Clemson could have an edge. But the one thing that they will have to do, Clemson, is that they'll have to take advantage of the opportunities that NC State gives them because, as we've seen over the course of this year, they're few and far between with the Wolfpack.
Well, one of the things that the offense does when it's out of kilter and does make mistakes when they normally don't is because they get antsy, because they see their opportunities to have the football shrink. And with the rushing game that Notre Dame had last week, NC State stood on that sideline without the football for a long time. And that's uncharacteristic of them. And I think Finley got caught, and that's why he made the big mistake. The key here for Clemson's defensive line corners, I think they have to get a lot of deflections because a lot of times that ball is out of Finley's hands within 3 seconds of the snap.
All right, so let's talk about our picks for this coming week in terms of what we're thinking right now. So I like Clemson covering. I like USC getting the points. What do y'all think?
I agree with you on both accounts.
How about you?
Boy, I think NC State is going to play a close game. I think it's going to be a 4-point game, Clemson.
Virginia Tech at Miami. I just don't know about Miami. I mean, they've just won so many ugly ways. I think I might take Virginia Tech and lay the 2.5
I'm
there.
feeling that way,
You see
too.
the $5 bill I have in my hand?
I see that.
If you could name the movie that I quoted with the whole dude thing, you can have this $5 bill.
The movie you quote. Give me the quote again.
I'm the dude, man, or his dude, or his dudeness, or Duderino.
Oh, Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Incorrect. Sorry. Incorrect.
Brian liked that one. Anyway, what do you think? Virginia Tech, Miami.
I like Miami. I know that they've been skating on thin ice all year. I like Miami.
Auburn, Texas A&M, 15-point spread, home team. I'm taking Auburn.
Yeah, well, I'm going A&M.
LSU at Alabama. I'm going to take the 21 with LSU. I hate – it's scary.
I'm not picking against Bama anymore.
Yeah, I should probably learn my lesson.
The answer, by the way, was the Big Lebowski. And the
Big Lebowski. Thank you, Brian Leonard. Great job. Have a great night, everybody. See you back here to wrap it up on Friday on Sports Talk.